All right, then we have the 5 costs. Now there are 8 standard 5 costs. And one of the things I want to call out here is that pretty much every 5 cost here is designed to be very threat-like and not need their traits. So if you see any of these 5 costs on like level 7, our expectation is you're going to be like, oh crap, I got to put this in. And let me explain why. Annie is a backliner, and we'll talk about her spell in a second. But what's interesting is Dark Child. When you have Annie, you also have Tibbers. Now, you don't have to play Tibbers, but you can. Takes up another slot. So you can place Annie, that's 1 Arcanist. If you place Tibbers, Tibbers is a tank, that's 2 Arcanist. So Annie by herself gives 2 Arcanist, which is, I believe, 18 AP. It's a pretty chunky buff. And you basically have 2 5 costs for the price of 1. And Tibbers and Annie can both be itemized. This isn't like some weird summon. Like, Tibbers is a full unit. This dude's got a tanky spell. He attacks, he heals. And then Annie's spell is really weird. Annie's mana is like 200. And she builds up and she builds up. So you're going to want like a Shojin and a blue buff or something like that. But once she casts, she lights the board on fire. And now everyone is dotted for the rest. All the enemies are essentially burning, not the actual burn debuff, but like actual AP damage for the rest of combat. And then from there, her spell is like a 20 mana fireball, you know. But pretty cool if you have a solid front line, like a Tibbers, and then you can just melt the enemy team, backline included. So, all right, Azir. For those of you that remember the Azir that had the 2 dummies that would come in, or the 2 soldiers, it's that Azir. So you place him, and with Emperor, you have 2 target dummies, essentially, of extra health. So very high utility here. Disruptor's a good trait to run a 2-piece of. And then the big thing is Azir is the 1 piece you need to start playing Shurima. And we'll talk about Shurima later, but I promise you, if you ever get an early Azir, immediately put this in and start considering Shurima. Shurima is now open to you because the other 3 Shurimans are all unlockables, but Azir is not, and Azir is the one that starts the train. So good stuff there. Fiddlesticks, 2 range. His ult is, he builds up mana, and then his ult is jump in, AoE CC. But the thing to note here is he has a passive that lowers the enemy armor and MR by 10. So just passively, this guy is making your enemies weaker. So very valuable to just slot him in, even if you're not playing Vanquisher. Kindred can activate 2 Quick Striker, which is another really good 2-piece aura trait. And then in addition, does good damage, but this is the Kindred that will put down the AoE circle and protect units for 2.5 seconds. Very, very powerful, can really swing fights. So definitely consider Kindred if you've got one other Quick Striker or really just in general, and does decent damage yourself. All right, Lucian and Senna. Basically, they come as 1 unit. So like when you buy it, it might start out as Senna. And they basically will rotate between their ults. So it'll be like Senna's on the board, she'll ult, which is her big like board-wide shield your team and do some damage, which then switches to Lucian, builds up mana, and then Lucian does his and then they switch. And that's kind of their shtick, is that they'll switch. And that's what Soulbound does. In addition, they have a team aura. When Lucian is out, your team gains damage amp. When Senna is out, your team gains durability. And so again, just placing them on your board, even with 0 Gunslinger, powerful. Ornn is back. Guess what he generates every 4 turns? If you guessed a random artifact, you're right. This Ornn is back. He can make artifacts. Now, one little twist, though, is that Ornn's stats are actually pretty bad. Like, if you look at him as a champion, they're not great. But if you put items on him, he gets a little bit more health per item. If you put artifacts on him, he gets a lot more health. So if you can put 3 artifacts on Ornn, all of a sudden you've got this like 7,000 HP god. So there's incentive to not just spread out your artifacts and ditch him, but actually keep them on Ornn. And a 2-star Ornn with like 1 or 2 artifacts, insanely tanky. So definitely try to pick him up if maybe you already have one and you want to build up to another. Pretty cool. Shyvana, if you've been playing the 7.5 Revival, this Shyvana is pretty similar. Transforms into a dragon, lands, breathes fire. But the Dragonborn gives your team, it prevents 8% damage from enemy abilities. So again, just passive, really good stats for your team. Good stuff. Zillion. Zilean is another champion that can be kind of frustrating because what he does is he throws out bombs on people, and those bombs start ticking, and they're doing some light damage. And every time he casts, he's building up Chrono Keeper. Chrono Keeper is building up XP. So the more you can get the Zilean to cast, you'll build up XP and actually speed up your leveling process if you want to get to like level 9, level 10. But here's the catch. When the bombs land on people after a certain amount of time, they will kill the target, right? So if that person has a 10,000 health Scion, Zilean is a great counter because tick, 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 boom. That Scion is gone. True damage, they're dead. So Zilean's a pretty good counter to any true tank. And if you can get him to spam cast with like Invoker, you'll build some XP.